think loneliness is one of the biggest issues in the UK at the moment. Well, among the top 50 at least. I think a lot of people in the UK deal with it. Some statistics from Campaign Against Loneliness, or to End Loneliness, sorry, is 49.63% of adults, 25.99 million in 2022, reported feeling lonely occasionally, sometimes, often not always. And I think we need to talk more about loneliness and what it means to be alone. Because loneliness strikes everyone. I think it's a thing that a lot of people have to deal with. Some people like being alone, but I'd argue that the large majority don't. And it's subjective, what loneliness is. But a lot of people would say it's the feeling or lack of companionship, of being around people, of having someone meaningful in their life or meaningful people in their life, or the loss of said companions. And I feel like social relationships we have need to sort of diversify more, because a lot of people focus on the quantity of social interaction, where more we should focus on the social relations with singular people, rather than the quality, I should say, of social relations. And it's something we should talk about more. Of course, there's different types of loneliness. There's emotional loneliness, which is from the Campaign to End Loneliness definition, is the absence of meaningful relationships. Social loneliness, perceived deficit in the quality of social connection. And existential loneliness, a feeling of a feeling of fundamental separateness from the wider world. Other types can include transient loneliness, that comes a feeling that comes and goes. Situational loneliness only occurs sometimes, like Sundays, holidays, and Christmas. Places that, or times rather, that we are most likely to be with family or significant others or friends. A lot of people can feel lonely on these days due to things like not being around their family, especially over the holidays and on Sundays, because within the UK it's seen as a sort of day that everybody gets together and has like a Sunday roast or a carvery. Chronic loneliness, feeling lonely all the time, or most of the time, which I think a lot of people can suffer from, especially now in the modern age with things like social media. I think that's a big effect on it, that people feel more lonely and have like the fear of missing out and things like that because they're not around their friends as often. I think it's a big thing that affects students and the older generation, where they might not have access to see their friends, whether from back home or friends around them, due to having to stay indoors or not having the ability to go out within the older community. And I think for younger people, it's a lot of people are frightened to make new relationships and new friendships while living in university. So I think it's a big effect on what people need to deal with. The difference between isolation, aloneness, solitude, and lonely, isolated. The difference between lonely, isolated, alone, and solitude, defined by the Campaign Against Ending Loneliness, is aloneness is the objective state of having no one around or being by oneself. And this definition comes from Haber, Etla, 1987. I think it's another one of the big factors of leading up to loneliness, because loneliness itself is a feeling, and it's an emotion. And I think there's a lot of things that can build up on it, as well as social isolation. Refers to the quantitative diminished social network, physically separated and or excluded, being away from people. I think COVID, for the 2 to 3 years that some people were stuck indoors and weren't able to talk to people, did affect a lot on the loneliness epidemic. That a lot more people have reported feeling lonely due to not being able to see, once again, their relatives, their family, and their loved ones. Solitude, a state of voluntary loneliness or aloneness, during which personal development, growth, and creative activity may take place. Solitude is associated with self-discovery, rest, relaxation, and escapism. This is from Barowitz, 2009, and Morgan in 2016. I think we need to also define solitude and loneliness, because a lot of people prefer being solitude so they can do creative works or find out more about themselves, things like meditation. And I think it's one of the big things we need to start talking about is, when can we tell that somebody's lonely or when somebody's in solitude? Somebody just wants to have something, because the definition for loneliness, like I said before, is a subjective experience arising from quality or quantitative deficient in personal social relationships. It's from Canham, 2015. And, there's a social, emotional, and existential. And I think we need to start focusing more on the social and existential side. A lot of people around my age and later in life think about things more existentially, and I think we need to talk about that more. According to the UK government's Tackling Loneliness Strategy Review, reported loneliness is higher for people who, in these cases, are aged 16 to 24 years old, are female, living or widowed, lived with a limiting mental condition, are renting, have lower neighbourhood belonging, and have lower social trust. And I feel like a way that we can combat this on the forefront is for the first three I can't really comment on. Well, I can on the 16 to 24-year-old, which would be to have more activities for younger people, to get them socialising, to get them talking to other people. I feel like that would contribute a lot. Talking to more people. Are female. I would need to read into this more, which I will. I might just cut this part. Are single or widowed. Once again, it's more, I think, dating apps do add to the loneliness epidemic as well, because some people who might match a lot can still end up being alone. And I feel like it's something that we don't need to as much remove or ban, but limit the access to and people using it. For the lower neighbourhood belonging and have low social trust, I feel like we can do things in our communities to get people who are either new to the area or are renting and who don't feel like they belong there, and get them talking to other residents so that they can interact and talk with other people in their community so they feel less isolated. I feel like this would help a lot. Get them meeting, maybe not MPs, but their neighbours, significant members of the community, trustable and respectable police officers, people who are supposed to keep them safe, And as well as that, maybe social workers or people who work in psychotherapy. If they are dealing with intense issues, they know who to contact and who to talk to. 1 in 10 workers feel lonely at work, and nearly half experience loneliness, and nearly half experience loneliness at work some of the time. I feel like we can once again tackle this by we need to talk a lot more within our communities and at workplaces, so people who are new to the environment and new to the workplace feel more welcome and don't feel as isolated while working in the workplace. Certain factors can increase our risk of loneliness. These include personal characteristics like age, ethnicity, or disability, and circumstances like living alone, going through significant life changes, or in certain areas. And I'll talk you through some of the risk factors of said loneliness. Risk factors for loneliness, which are younger adults, aged 16 to 29, are more likely, rather than those in older age groups, reported feeling lonely often or always. Research from the Co-op Foundation found that 5% of young people say they never feel lonely. Uni students are likely to experience loneliness, with 1 in 4 students feeling lonely all or most of the time. And international students are considered to be particularly high risk and may experience cultural loneliness. And I feel like another way we can tackle this is, once again, doing things within our community, targeting things to younger people, seeing that a lot of people tend to stay indoors rather than to socialise with maybe their flat mates or their flat neighbours, as well as people on their course choosing to be isolated. Milestones like furthering education, seeking employment, moving out of parental home, or establishing a long romantic relationship can alter social networks, because you're moving away from places, especially with furthering education. You're going to usually completely different city. Seeking employment, a lot of people tend to just focus on that, so they don't have time for other people because they are looking to have a job. Moving out of parental home, not being with family members who you may have lived with all your life, and being somewhere where you might be out of their grasp, and being somewhere where you can't really talk to them. Romantic relationships, long-term romantic relationships, because you're focusing more on your partner rather than your friends or people around you. 16 to 24-year-olds may have less experience regulating intense emotions or of loneliness due to their age. I'm cutting that one. I think younger people are more in tune with their relationships and their emotions compared to adults, and regulating intense emotions. I feel like younger people now are more likely to deal with it in a healthy way rather than bottling it up and not talking about it. 55% of lonely young people said they not having money to attend or take part in activities impacts how lonely they feel, especially pertinent during the cost of living crisis, which I think is a big factor as well. Cost of living and people not being able to go out as much. And I feel like a lot of people can suffer a lot more due to this, especially university students who are more likely to be alone and making friends, may not be able to afford going out to see other people. Fuck, did I put my water? That's all the way over there. Shit. the impacts of loneliness can be quite bad, because loneliness can increase the risk of early mortality by 26%, which I believe refers to self-harm, and loneliness can increase the risk of early mortality by 26%. I believe this is due to things like poor loneliness can increase the risk of mortality by 26%. I feel like this may be due to the lack of wanting to keep one healthy, as well as things like self-harm and suicide, which I feel is a big impact on our generation, which I feel is a big impact on the younger generation, because a lot more people don't know how to regulate their emotions, especially when they don't have the resources to seek people who have the ability to help them. And I feel that it can loneliness can put people at greater risk of poorer mental health, including depression. And I feel like it's another issue that's circulating or being spoken about more, which is a good thing. And I feel like we should talk a lot more about social well-being and mental health, as well as loneliness, and how they correlate. Research estimates that 60% of people experiencing chronic loneliness experience mental distress, compared to 50% of people who are not chronically lonely. 62% of lonely young people say that feeling lonely makes them lose confidence in themselves, which once again spirals that effect. They don't have enough confidence to speak to people who they might become friends with. They don't have enough there seems to be an association between this and them not being able to make more friends, so it might damage or risk their opportunity of meeting new people. 62% of lonely young people saying that it makes them lose confidence is also a big issue, because it could also affect things like work, whether that be the workplace or school, as well as making friends, or things like dating, where they don't have enough confidence in themselves to put themselves out there, which leads them to be more alone. Loneliness can be associated with poorer sleep quality in younger adults, and I feel like, once again, this is a spiral thing where people aren't getting enough sleep, so their brains aren't working as hard. Now I'm going to cut that. Loneliness in adolescence with lower educational attainment, where people aren't trying to work as hard because they don't have people around them and they don't feel confident in what they're doing in their work. And 48% of lonely people, 48% of lonely young people saying that feeling lonely makes them less likely to want to progress in work, which is an issue because it can lead to not getting as a well-paying job or feeling as happy as they could be in the workplace. Now I'm going to read some statistics from the National Office of National Statistics. Around 27% of adults say they feel lonely always, often, or some of the times. And the proportion of adults who experience loneliness remained relatively stable over time. This is from time series data from the Opinions and Lifestyle Survey, OPN, from March 2020 onwards, of loneliness and other measures of personal well-being The average levels of personal well-being remain similar in the same period of time a year ago. 6 out of 9 for life satisfaction, the same as a year ago. 7.2 of those feelings, 7.2 out of 10 for those feelings that the things they've done in life are worthwhile, same as last year. 7 out of 10 for happiness, 6.9. The year before this was written down, and 3.9 for anxiety, the same as the previous year. We asked some important issues. When asked about the important issues in the UK, the most common reported questions were the cost of living, the NHS, the economy, climate change, the environment and housing. And I feel like these are big factors as well to loneliness. The cost of living crisis being probably the top one. Like I was saying before, people not having enough money to go out and socialise with their friends, and leading to a downward spiral of don't have enough money so they can't spend time around their family and friends. The NHS, if they are feeling loneliness and they don't have anybody to turn to, it's harder for them to garner and gain support from the National Health. It's harder for them to gain or garner support from the NHS, whether it be licensed therapists or people they can just talk to generally. The economy, once again, money. And I feel like we need to start talking and tackling loneliness as an emerging issue. I feel like one of the big parts now contributing to loneliness is things like AI chatbots and their intent to satisfy, where they can make people feel less lonely, but they aren't having as meaningful relationships with other people. AI chat. People turning to AI chatbots to talk to. This is as well as a lot of people using them as surrogate friends or therapists when they do not have any kind of license or certification, just articles, and they lack the same human empathy that a human would use. In 2023, the US Surgeon General declared that the nation was experiencing a loneliness epidemic. This is in the US, constituting a public health concern on par with smoking and obesity. The report cited that 26% increase in the premature death associated with loneliness, with the overall impact likened to smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And in the UK, nearly half of all adults experience loneliness, sometimes, occasionally, always or often, with 1 in 10 feeling chronic loneliness. And contrary to what this article says, I personally believe, because it says here AI chatbots such as Claude, Copilot and ChatGPT are increasing his confidence of choice. On one hand, this might seem as a positive democratization of emotional support and care of people in need. On the other hand, there's a growing concern surrounding potential psychological and social harms, particularly pertaining to social isolation and loneliness. And I feel like a big part of this is people not really speaking to other people, but rather a AI behind a screen, which is harming not only our environment, but the people it might be talking to, seeing that the AIs don't have an advanced understanding of the human brain and emotion, where they just read articles rather than going through the experiences. So they can't relate, they can only pretend to relate. I feel like this is quite a big issue. I think we just need to talk about this more, start talking more about the social issues and helping the older and younger generations through this epidemic. I feel like a lot of us are struggling at the moment, especially with loneliness. And I feel like we just need to talk about it more and tackle this.